In Venezuela, President Nicolás Maduro Moros handed over the Cacique Chaima group of oil wells. Russia blames Ukraine, Washington, and NATO for the assassination attempt against the president Vladimir Putin. Israeli occupation forces killed 3 Palestinians in a new military incursion in Nablus, in the occupied Palestine. Hello from the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba. This is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. In Venezuela, the President Nicolás Maduro Moros handed over the Cacique Chaima group of oil wells, from which the resources derived from their production will be destined to social investment. With this measure, the Venezuelan head of state complies with the assignation of almost $25 million a month produced by this conglomerate of 50 wells, known as Macoya, to guarantee the pensions of the country's workers. Authorities estimate that as production increases, income will increase, which will contribute to the economic recovery in the midst of the resistance against the commercial and financial blockade imposed by the United States.
With our own model of investment, of work, with our science, with our professionals, with our workers, we will gradually and definitely recover the productive capacity of the Venezuelan oil industry to put this wealth at the service of the rights of the people, the right to work, the right to wages, the right to health, the right to education, the right to housing, the right to food. This is the truth.
The Venezuelan president also detailed the way in which the capital obtained will be administered.
I am handing over this entire oil field with all its productive potential, and thanks to which the monthly income is going to increase up to almost $40 million. I am completely handing it over to you so that all the production and all the resources generated here go directly to the National Fund of Social Benefits for the Workers of Venezuela. All of this will be deposited in a special account opened in our central bank to benefit workers throughout the country.
Now we move on to other topics. A nasal formulation developed by Cuba against COVID-19 has been declared totally safe by the nation's Center for Genetic Engineering and Biotechnology. The scientific entity said the formulation, which is traded under the name of nasalferon, is totally safe and well tolerated by the general population. According to the investigation center, the product strengthens the immune system and is administered via nasal spray with doses of 1 drop in each nostril twice a day for a period of 10 days. The antiviral preparation can be used against acute respiratory diseases, and it was developed to increase the defensive response of the country's population against the Delta variant of COVID-19. In Mexico, President Andrés Manuel López Obrador has issued a letter to the administration of Joe Biden, calling for the United States to end aid to organizations he perceives as opposed to his government. The letter specifically identifies funds from the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, though it does not name the groups López Obrador objects to. The U.S. government, specifically through USAID, has for some time been financing organizations openly against illegal and the legitimate government he represents, said the president in the letter, dated Tuesday and read during the president's morning press briefing on Wednesday. Moreover, he also stated that this is clearly an interventionist act, contrary to international laws and the relations which should prevail between free and sovereign states. And Mexico's army welcomed a new search puppy on Wednesday, gifted from Turkey following the death of a Mexican rescue dog who had been helping to find survivors in February's massive earthquake near the Syrian border. The 3-month-old German Shepherd will join Mexico's renowned canine unit, specialized in finding survivors in a country prone to earthquakes and other natural disasters. After an online vote, the puppy has been named Arkadas, which means friend in Turkish. Arkadas will be trained by the same trainer who cared for Proteo, the rescue dog that died on the mission in Turkey. Mexico deployed rescue units and dogs to Turkey after the magnitude 7.8 earthquake that shook a huge area near the southern border with Syria, causing at least 54,000 fatalities across both nations. Mexico paid homage to Proteo, also a German Shepherd, at a military funeral earlier this year. Let's take a short break, but first remember you can follow us on TikTok at TeleSUR English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates and more. Other stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. The Colombian president, Gustavo Petro, advocates a solution-based alliance between Spain and Latin America to face the present environmental crisis. The call was made by a president in the speech at the Spanish parliament during the first day of his official visit to the European country. Petro praised Spain's taking charge of the European Union's presidency during the second trimester of the year and the ZELAC summit with the community bloc afterwards. The Colombian president, who promotes the transition to clean energies, is the driving force behind an international alliance for the protection of the Amazon.
It is no longer a political debate as it used to be, whether to preserve things or change them. It has to do directly with an order that science is giving us, because it has found the elements that are effectively leading us to extinction in the short term. We can believe it or not, as if this were a religious question. But it is not religion, it is science.
And speaking in the Spanish parliament, Colombian President Gustavo Petro proposed a paradigm shift to address the global climate crisis.
Science is telling us that we are entering a time of extinction, a time of profound crisis, of change of paradigms, of a change of ideas that we have clung to without knowing the reality, of change of cultures, of change of ways of being every day.
And the police in 8 European countries raided 150 addresses on Wednesday in a vast, coordinated swoop targeting the notorious Italian 'Ndrangheta mafia, the Belgian prosecutors said on Wednesday. Eric Van Duys, the spokesperson for the Federal Prosecutor's Office, told a news conference that it is likely the biggest operation ever carried out in Europe against the Calabrese mafia. He said that 1,400 police officers in Italy were involved in the raids, revising down a figure of 3,000 prosecutors had given earlier in a statement. He also stated that more than 1,000 police officers in Germany took part. Van Duys stated the European raids were triggered from the Belgian prosecutors' investigations opened 5 years ago under the greatest secrecy. The EU countries where the raids took place were Italy, Germany, France, Belgium, Spain, Portugal, Slovenia, and Romania, prosecutors said. In Belgium, there were 25 police raids and 13 people were arrested, including at least 6 who were wanted under European arrest warrants issued by Italy.
This is probably the biggest operation ever carried out in Europe against the Calabrese mafia. More than 1,000 police officers were involved in this morning's raids in Germany and 1,400 in Italy. All of this was based on a Belgian dossier. All of the individuals are thought to be members of the Italian mafia organization 'Ndrangheta. The criminal activities of which these people are suspected in Belgium are the participation in several drug shipments, mainly cocaine, between South America and Western Europe, as well as was the laundering of the proceeds of these shipments through various legal companies. So there is a direct link between this drug money and the illicit economy.
And now we address other topics. On Thursday, Moscow blamed Washington and NATO for the assassination attempt against the Russian President Vladimir Putin. The spokesperson of the Russian Foreign Ministry, Maria Zakharova, called as accountable the Kiev regime for the magnitude attempt, also its supporters in Washington, London, and in general NATO as responsible too for the sinister. Zakharova stressed that there is no doubt that behind the attack is the hand of the President Zelensky, who has long and consciously supported and used terrorist methods against the Russian civilian infrastructure and population. On Wednesday, Russia's investigation committee announced the opening of a criminal case for terrorism after a drone attack against the Kremlin. On the night of May the 2nd, the Russian military and special services managed to take down 2 drones flying over the Kremlin premises. In this context, Lower House President Vyacheslav Volodin stated that negotiations with the current Ukrainian government are not an option after the drone attack on the Kremlin. He also emphasized that the Kiev government threatens the security of Russia, Europe, and the entire world, and urged to recognize it as a terrorist organization. The official explained that the criminal methods of Kiev government, such as nuclear blackmail, assassinations of political and public figures, sabotage, and undermining of civilian facilities, are obvious to the entire world community. Finally, he labeled the terrorist attack on the President Vladimir Putin as an attack on Russia. And in the same line, the Venezuelan government condemned on Wednesday the assassination attempt against Russian President Vladimir Putin. The statement was made on the government's official Twitter account, where it referred to President Nicolas Maduro's condemnation of the assassination attempt on behalf of the Venezuelan people. The note also praised the effective action of the Russian security forces in neutralizing the 2 unmanned aerial vehicles involved in the action, and reiterated Venezuela's historic position against all acts of aggressions, forms, expressions, and demonstrations that threatened the international peace and security. The statement ends by expressing Venezuela's solidarity with the Russian people and the government, and its hope that the material and intellectual perpetrators that organize, finance, and sponsor the magnitude attempt be brought to justice. TeleSUR English continues to grow. You can now tune in from 33 different African countries using StarSat. Dial 461 and enjoy our Latin American alternative broadcast. One final short break, and we'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. 3 Palestinians were killed on Thursday morning by Israeli occupation forces, gunfire in a new military incursion in the Al Jasmina neighborhood of the old city of Nablus in the north of the occupied West Bank. The Palestinian Ministry of Health announced the death of at least 3 people who died from bullet wounds. The Palestinian Red Crescent named the martyrs as Hassan Kannani, Muhad al-Masri, and Ibrahim Jober, and confirmed 2 of those killed were hit in the faces and 4 people were transferred to hospital for treatment, while at least 100 people and 50 people suffered tear gas inhalation, including school children. With Thursday's assassinations, so far in 2023, the number of Palestinians killed by Israeli troops has risen to 106, including 20 minors. In Sudan, the United Nations top humanitarian official Martin Griffiths has made a statement after arriving in Port Sudan on an urgent mission to find ways to bring aid to the millions of Sudanese who are unable to flee the ongoing fighting.
We need to be very, very clear about commitments made to ensure the safety of movement of supplies from Port Sudan, or indeed from Chad coming into Darfur, from Port Sudan westwards to the places of need, indeed Khartoum and Omdurman being the most obvious. And those commitments are of high priority for me, and we've already started the conversations with the parties to identify what we need from them.
The United Nations official said he would like to meet with the leaders of the opposing factions.
We would be wanting to meet those two leaders as soon as possible, separately, face-to-face, to explain to them our requirements built on the discussions with humanitarian operational agencies, UN and non-UN, so that it is clear to them and to us what commitments we can realistically get and what they can realistically expect from us.
On Wednesday, the United Nations Secretary General issued a statement regarding the situation in Sudan, addressed the refugee issue, and called on the parties involved in the conflict to put the interests of the Sudanese people first and to return to peace and the formation of a civilian government.
Has already affirmed that more than 100,000 people have fled and 800,000 people might flee the country in the coming days and weeks. The fighting needs to stop, and to stop now. All parties must put the interests of the Sudanese people first, and that means peace, a return to civilian rule, allowing for the development of the country. We are putting these goals front and center as we engage with the parties to the conflict and work hand in hand with the African Union and the Intergovernmental Authority on Development.
Guterres also referred to the countries that are receiving large numbers of refugees and the need to provide them full support.
It is absolutely essential to massively support Chad in the present situation. On the other hand, we have other countries in the region that are in their own peace processes. Ethiopia is in a peace process. It is absolutely essential to avoid any spillover from Sudan to Ethiopia.
On Wednesday, Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida met with his Kenyan counterpart William Ruto in Nairobi. The leaders discussed the conflict in Ukraine and the ongoing crisis in Sudan. Kishida reiterated his nation's desire to strengthen trade relations with Kenya in order to help contribute to the stability of the region. The Prime Minister stressed that since Japan holds the G7 presidency, they would like to directly hear the voices of African countries and make sure that those voices are reflected in the discussions at the G7 Hiroshima summit this month. For his part, the President of Kenya, William Ruto, stated that they look forward to their discussions and that the African nation hopes to make considerable progress on a broad range of subjects that are of mutual interest between Japan and Kenya. And the President of the Islamic Republic of Iran, Ebrahim Raisi, accompanied by a large high-level political and economic ministerial delegation, arrived in Syria on Wednesday for a two-day official visit aimed at consolidating strategic relations between the two allied nations. From Damascus, our correspondent Hisham Wanos with all the details.
The Iranian president was received with full honor by his Syrian counterpart at the People's Palace, a ceremony that underlines the historic nature of this visit. The two leaders took the opportunity to consolidate, expand, and develop economic and trade relations between their two countries. In order to address the West's economic blockade, by signing a comprehensive long-term strategic cooperation plan covering the fields of oil, agriculture, transportation, free trade zone, telecommunications, and information technology, among others.
The economic relations took up a large part of my talks with the Iranian president today, and the memorandums of understanding that were signed and the projects that were discussed, which are many and varied, will give a great boost to these relations by developing mechanisms that can increase the volume of trade and investment between the two countries and help mitigate the impact of the sanctions imposed on us.
El fortalecimiento de las relaciones políticas, la cooperación bilateral en materia de
The strengthening of political relations, bilateral security cooperation, the consolidation of the axis of resistance, the economic support to Syria in the face of West coercive measures, the contribution to the reconstruction of the destroyed areas in the Arab country, the return of Syrian refugees and the displaced to their homes, the possible re-establishment of relations between Damascus and Ankara, and the withdrawal of the invading U.S. troops from Syrian soil also occupied a large part of the talks held between the two leaders.
The visit is to confirm that the axis of resistance remains firm and that the countries that contributed to the victory of Syria will be the ones that will contribute to the process of its reconstruction, a matter that Syria has repeatedly confirmed, assuring that those who shed Syrian blood will not be able to participate in the reconstruction of the country. And the visit of the Iranian president today takes place in this context with a remarkable economic character.
The visit, which is the first by an Iranian leader to Syria in 13 years, in addition to being historic, constitutes a declaration of political and military victory from Damascus for the entire axis of resistance, a victory that both allied nations, through the agreements signed during this visit, seek to consolidate with an economic triumph in the current joint battle they are waging against the economic terrorism exercised by Washington and its allies against them.
Hisham Wannous, TeleSUR, Damascus, Syria.
And like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.